The Tudors is a historical drama about the reign of King Henry VIII. It aired on Showtime in the United States and in Britain on the BBC. It aired in the US from 2007 to 2010, 4 seasons and a total of 38 episodes. Now, King Henry VIII, for anybody who doesn't know, I'll give a very brief sketch here. He is most famous in English history for a couple of reasons. One is that he had a very tumultuous marital life. He went through 6 wives. And there's a little rhyme that apparently English school children learn to keep them straight, which is divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. In other words, his first wife he divorced, the second one he beheaded, third one died of natural causes, fourth one he divorced, fifth one he beheaded, and the sixth one outlived him. So of his 6 wives, he divorced 2 of them and he beheaded 2 of them. But in addition to that, he also has a place in English history because when the Pope would not grant him one of his divorces, he ended up embracing the cause of the Reformation and is the reason that England split away from the Catholic Church to found the Anglican Church instead. So, big point in religious history and the history of the Reformation, etc. If it isn't apparent already from his habit of beheading his wives, he had a reputation for being very hot-tempered and cruel. In addition to beheading his wives, he also beheaded a number of other people, including his advisor, Thomas Cromwell, and lots of other people who displeased him in one way or the other. The British historian David Starkey has referred to him as the English Stalin, meaning somebody in English history who is every bit as cruel and vindictive as Stalin was. So when I first found out that they had made a TV series about him, I was kind of half intrigued and also half repulsed or half confused. I'm a history nerd, so anytime there's a history drama, I'm intrigued, especially when it's like a longer history drama. You know, this was a full 4 seasons. But at the same time, I'm like, Henry VIII. I don't even like Henry VIII. Do I want to spend 4 seasons with Henry VIII when the guy was a jerk, right? Why would anyone want to spend all that time hanging out with Henry VIII? But eventually curiosity got the better of me. And in 2011, I believe it was, when I was back in the US for a couple of months, my brother-in-law and I watched through some of the episodes in the video store. 2011, they still had video stores. I was remembering this just the other day and thought, were video stores still around back in 2011? But they must have been, because we were still renting these videos from them. But when you rent them from the video store, you want to go in order, but you have to go with what's available. So if somebody else has episode 3 already checked out, then you have to jump ahead and go to episode 4. So we jumped around a little bit depending on what was available. We couldn't start from the very beginning. And so we got a little bit of a taste of it. We did not watch the whole thing through at that time. But the taste of it intrigued me. It seemed well done. It was dramatic. It was watchable. It was intriguing. So when I was in Cambodia in 2013, and in Cambodia at that time, you could get pirated DVDs very cheaply, and they had box sets of a number of TV shows. And they were selling box sets of the Tudors. You could buy the whole 4 seasons for like $5. And so I bought it, and I watched it, and I have to say I found it incredibly entertaining. A little cheesy at times, but definitely entertaining. So when it comes to entertaining, check it out. It gets my recommendation. Now, as a history nerd, of course, I immediately want to talk about how accurate is it really? And I know that's not the lens that you're always supposed to view these dramas through, right? At least when the creators of these dramas make them, and when they take a lot of liberties with the real history, they always defend themselves by saying, well, look, it's not supposed to be a real history, it's supposed to be a drama. We're not making a history textbook here, we're making a television drama, so lighten up, you nerds, and stop worrying about how much of this is historically accurate, right? That's always what they say. And indeed, the producers of the Tudors put out statements very much to that effect at that time. And yet, if you Google any reviews of the Tudors or search for any reviews here on YouTube, everybody always wants to talk about the historical accuracy. That's like the first thing that seems to be on everybody's mind. And, I think in spite of what the entertainment industry wants to believe, which is people don't care about the historical accuracy, people care a lot about the historical accuracy, because when you're watching this, you're like, wow, that is interesting. Did that really happen? And if it really happens, it says what you're like, wow, okay, well, that's really interesting. On the other hand, if you go to Wikipedia and it didn't really happen, you're like, well, okay, maybe this show isn't quite as interesting as I thought it was. There's also an excitement when you think that you're learning actual real history, which makes you appreciate the show more, and that excitement is diminished if you feel like the show is taking too many liberties with history. So, in other words, what I'm trying to say is that I think a lot of people find the interest of a historical drama like this to be interesting in proportion to how faithful it is to the actual history, as much as the show's producers would like you to just stop worrying about that and just enjoy the costumes. But with that being said, I've got to say, I thought it actually holds up fairly well to the actual history. Now, take me with a grain of salt, because I'm not an expert on this period. Prior to watching this drama, my only real sources were Monarchy by David Starkey, and This Sceptred Isle, the BBC radio show about British history, and then The History of Britain by Simon Sharma, all of which I've talked about on this channel before, and I'll link to my reviews of those in the description down below. But based on that limited knowledge, what I learned from those sources matched up very well with what was being portrayed in the Tudors. Now, David Starkey, who wrote the Monarchy book I just mentioned, would be absolutely livid if he heard me saying that, because he hates this series. He was interviewed for The Independent, in which he said it was a disgrace that the BBC squandered public money on a historical drama which he claimed had been deliberately dumbed down to appeal to an American audience. He said it is gratuitously awful. He says the series was made with the original intention of dumbing it down so that even an audience in Omaha, Nebraska could understand it. So, maybe a little bit of anti-American bias there in his words, but yeah, he feels he's got strong opinions on this show. Now, I am given to understand from some of my British friends that David Starkey is one of those public figures who makes a career out of saying outrageous statements. I mean, he is a solid historian and respected in his field, but insofar as he's a television personality in Britain, and he is also a television personality in Britain, he likes to have strong opinions that will get him quoted in the newspapers. So this could just be fake outrage. I don't know. But we'll give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he really has strong opinions about this show, and other people as well have complained about the historical accuracy of it. So it's a show really where there are some things that are accurate and some things that are not accurate, and it's kind of just a matter of how much are you willing to forgive. So, is your glass half full or is your glass half empty? Do you say, well, okay, they got a lot accurate, but they also fudge some details? Or do you say, well, sure, there's some stuff that's accurate, but they also fudge some details? It just depends what you want to emphasize. So I've read a few reviews of this. I've also listened to a few reviews of it, and it seems like the principal complaint people have about this series is everyone was much too sexy. So Anne Boleyn was played by a sexier looking actress than actual in the historical record. Anne of Cleves looked better in this than she probably did in actual history. And of course, King Henry VIII looked much sexier than he probably did in the actual history. And I understand that everybody... This bothers some people more than it bothers others. And I think maybe it bothers people who have previous attachments to images of these characters, maybe from previous dramas, maybe from studying the historical portraits or something like that. For me, I didn't really have any strong image of any of these characters in mind. So in terms of representation, visual representation, I am willing to completely give a pass on that. I don't care if they have the same hair color as the historical person. I don't care really how much they look like the historical person. Especially in the age before photographs and video cameras. I just give it a complete pass on that. It's like going to a stage play, right? You don't go to a stage play of Shakespeare's Richard III and said, well, the actor who was playing the Bishop of Canterbury didn't really look like the historical Bishop of Canterbury, right? When you go to a play, you just give it a complete pass on how much the actors looked like the historical figures. I'm inclined to do that for a television drama. So, one of the things I did pick up from the sources I mentioned before about King Henry VIII is we picture him as this kind of old, fat king. But he wasn't old and fat. At one point, he was young and athletic. And then he got fat when he got older, as some people do. I think it was a combination of things. There was a jousting injury that gave him a leg wound, which hindered his mobility afterwards. And because he wasn't able to move around as lot, he started gaining weight. And then, apparently when he surrounded himself by young men who were able to eat and drink a lot because they had young metabolisms. And he was able to do that when he was young, but as he got older, his metabolism slowed down in that leg injury. But he kept eating and drinking like he used to, and that's when he really put on a lot of weight. And of course, as always, somebody correct me in the comments if I'm getting this wrong, but that's what I remember hearing somewhere. So, they started off with a young, sexy Henry VIII, and I thought, yeah, fine. He was young and good-looking and athletic when he was younger. And then as he got older, he got a little bit fatter and a little bit grayer, but he was still pretty sexy all the way through. And this bugs a lot of people. But like I said, I give it a complete pass on visual representation of historical figures. There are some rumors. I think I heard this on Steve Donahue's channel when he was ranting about this one day. That apparently the actor had it in his contract that he was not going to wear a fat suit or he was not going to put on weight for the part. So that may have been contractually demanded by the actors that they would continue looking sexy all the way through the 4 seasons of the TV show. But yeah, I don't really care. So if you take away the fact that everybody in the show looks much sexier than they did in real life, and you go through the events of the show, it lines up pretty well with recorded history in the broad strokes. Now, if you want to nitpick every little detail they got wrong, well, we'd be here all night. And there are plenty of places where you can go to find that. The Wikipedia page at one point had a whole section devoted to where they departed from actual history. I was just checking it again now, and that seems to have been taken down, but I'm sure you could find it on the archives. Yeah, I mean, again, I guess it just depends how much are you willing to forgive. You know, I'm a history geek myself. I always figured the more historically accurate, the better. But, I mean, what are we comparing this show to? Think of all the recent historical drama series that have come out. And I'm thinking of like the Borgia's TV show, or the Vikings TV show, right? Or what other history-based TV shows have been out recently? I mean, when you compare it against those shows, the Tudors looks very conservative in its treatment of history. I mean, the Borgias, that show just went completely off the historical rails to the point and I'm no expert on the Borgias. I was just, double checking Wikipedia to see how factually accurate the show was, but it was not accurate at all. I mean, I'm not even talking about the small things. I'm talking about like big details. And I'm like, oh, okay, why am I even watching this? This is so far removed from the actual history. Whereas the Tudors, okay, this or that, some stuff, some composite characters were created, some stuff was dramatized a little bit more than actual was in history, but, there were a lot of names in the show. They were almost all historical. All the characters broadly did what they were supposed to have done in history. I think maybe the one exception to this, the one I think major departure that the show made from history, in my book, in my judgment, was getting rid of one of King Henry VIII's sisters. So I believe he had a sister named Mary, and they made him into a composite character of just Margaret. I don't know why they did that. I mean, maybe to simplify the story, but they were willing to get into some complex details in other areas. So and it wouldn't have been that much complex, right? And then his sister Mary, I believe, was married off to the King of Scots, which is how it turned out that Mary, Queen of Scots, later had a claim to the English throne. And then, of course, her son James eventually became one of the English kings. So, if that was a detail that got omitted that would have had big ramifications later if the show had actually continued. Speaking of which, let's talk about how much the show continued. It finished right with the death of King Henry VIII. And it's a pity that they didn't do more. So the show is actually called The Tudors. And The Tudors doesn't just refer to Henry VIII. The Tudors refers to Henry's whole family. So he had 3 children, all of whom reigned after him. Edward, Mary, and then Elizabeth. All of whom died childless, and so then when his children were done, then it was the end of the Tudor dynasty, and then that's when King James from Scotland inherited the throne. But Yeah, those three were the Tudor dynasty. And since the show was called The Tudors, I imagine at some point somebody was leaving open the door to do the whole Tudor dynasty. I haven't been able to see this written down anywhere. So if you go onto Wikipedia and you look up the show, there's no indication on Wikipedia that anyone was ever considering continuing the show after Henry VIII's death. But the last season does leave a number of introduce a number of plot threads which would have had their natural payoff continuing through the reigns. For example, much is discussed about the concern of Edward's Protestant tutelage. And so that would have had its payoff during his reign. So King Henry's son, who was Edward VI, I believe, inherited the throne very young. He had been educated by hardline Protestants and, strident Protestants. He wasn't as hardline as some of the other Protestant radicals during the Reformation era, like the Puritans, etc. But very strident Protestants and pushed forward a Protestant agenda. But then he died very young, and then his sister Mary, who was another one of King Henry's children, took the throne after him, and then she went back the other way to Catholicism, and she burned a lot of the Protestants. So Hugh Latimer, who would have been one of the principal figures in King Edward's reign, was introduced in season 4. And then he was somebody who got burned at the stake during Mary's Catholic counter-reaction under Queen Mary, otherwise known as Bloody Mary, because of all the Protestant martyrs under her. Speaking of which, another prominent Protestant that got burned under Bloody Mary was Thomas Cranmer, who had pushed forward the Reformation, and he had been a prominent figure in seasons 1 and 2, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. Although he disappears after season 2, and I think that's just because they had other storylines they were following and they didn't want to keep paying the actor. But I think in real history he did stick around. So I guess that would be another one of my criticisms in terms of historical accuracy. And I'm willing to forgive a lot, but it would have been. I don't know why they got rid of one of King Henry VIII's sisters. That was straying pretty far from history when they eliminated her whole story. And then if they kept Cranmer staying around, because I believe he was still active and still doing stuff, right, up through the end of King Henry's reign. I don't know what was he doing. At any rate, he was still around when Queen Mary became queen because she burned him at the stake. Now, speaking of the Tudors, I guess I should maybe backtrack a little or qualify a statement I made earlier. I have come to appreciate, when the series first came out, I said earlier that I couldn't understand why they were filming a series about King Henry VIII because he was just such a jerk, and who would want to spend time with him anyways. But I've come to appreciate, and this is again partly through BookTube, that there are a lot of Tudor fanatics out there. There are a lot of people who get really into the whole Tudor era. And so that may explain why people are complaining about the historical accuracy of the series, because there are a lot of people who really feel strongly about this era. I'm not necessarily one of them, but they are out there. And while I'm on the subject, earlier I said that this series seemed to me to be much more historically accurate than any of the other recent cable historical dramas that have come out in the last 20 years or so. But perhaps people who are from England may have grown up with the BBC dramas from like the 70s and 80s, which may have been more historically accurate when dealing with these subjects, perhaps. So that may, again, explain why somebody like David Starkey was so upset when the series divulged from history, even though I would consider most of the stuff it changed to be rather minor details. But yeah, I mean, the series, I think, is incredibly watchable. One of the things I like about it is, even though it's a soap opera about, King Henry VIII and his 6 wives, it also gets into the politics of it. And it does not shy away from all the political and religious squabbling and politicking that was going on during this time. So all the maneuvers that they had to go through to try and convince people that the king had more legal authority in England than the Pope did, and the reformation of the clergy. I mean, another show would have been like, okay, forget the religious stuff. We're just going to focus on the drama with the wives and the affairs and the beheadings. But no, I mean, this show gets into it. So you've got a lot of interesting stuff in here, and it held my attention. Season 4 is maybe the weak season, purely in terms of watchability. Season 4, the drama is slowing down a little bit. And I don't know if that is the writers missing a step, or if it's just because they're covering a less interesting period of history at that point. But those first 3 seasons, wow, are really watchable. And then, by that point, you're hooked enough to watch season 4 anyways. So, yeah, I give it my stamp of approval. But like I said, it seems to have gotten strong opinions by history buffs or people who are Tudor fanatics. So let me know what your opinion is about this show. And thank you very much. I'll see you next time.